My name is Lovepreet Buttar. I'm a managing director at Mercadian, and I co-lead the not-for-profit and human services niche for the firm. I'm so excited to be here and excited to have the privilege of kicking this panel off. Thank you all for being with us. I just love this topic. As you know, not all generations are created equal. We grow up in different times, different levels of communication, different technological advancements. And I really do believe a lot of that shapes how we want to be marketed to. Some donors embrace social media, others really crave it, and it's not an option, it's a requirement. So the job that the not-for-profits have to attract and engage multi-generations is really more challenging than ever, which makes this topic more relevant than it's ever been. So I did a little digging because I was intrigued, and I looked up the history of the word philanthropy. And it's so beautiful. It was coined by a Greek playwright, and it meant love of humanity. And now I'm sure it's taken on different meanings, and it means different things to different people, but really it's love of humanity. And the more common definition I've heard is it's giving gifts of time, talent, and treasure to help make life better for other people. So the three individuals we have on our panel today, I think, are perfect examples of individuals who give their time, their talent, their treasure to help others. So it's my pleasure to introduce the panel. We have Jenny Hill, CEO of the Girl Scouts of Central and Southern New Jersey. We have Sarah Fawcett-Lee, Senior Vice President and Chief Philanthropy Officer of Virtua Health. And we have Barrett Young, CEO of the Rescue Mission of Trenton. All right, so let's get started. So where I thought we would start, we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about how do we market to the multiple generations differently? What are the differences? Before we get into that, let's talk about some commonalities. I do think there are some strategies that all not-for-profits should have in place, no matter who they're targeting. So I'd love to hear thoughts on what are some of the commonalities and what are some of the strategies that not-for-profits should have in place. Always.
It's a big question. Yeah. When you think about all of the generations that we're engaging with and how to have meaningful engagement with them, so that everyone feels that they have a place within your organization and a voice and a way to have impact that's meaningful to them. So it's really a multifaceted approach when you think about it. And there are parts of our mission that resonate probably more with some generations than they do with others. But really, when it comes down to it, it's really what we care about as individuals and what our values are as a society. So I think every donor, when they make a gift, really thinks about what is it that they're trying to achieve with their money. And I think different generations have different ways of thinking about their level of trust in your organization and how they want to be made to feel like they've made a difference. Maybe that helps kick off the conversation a little bit.
I would jump in and say that I think, Sarah, you hit a good point there. Is I think doesn't matter the generation, doesn't matter the age of the individual. If someone is looking at an organization to give or to donate to it, there is some reason for that, right? Is it for example, for the rescue mission, are they looking at it because they themselves have experienced homelessness or addiction, or a family member has experienced that, or a loved one, or someone that they know has experienced something that they're giving towards or giving to? And how do you tap into that, and how do you continue to tap into that is a big piece of this, because there are lots of organizations out there that do good. There are lots of companies that are out there doing this work and organizations. And how do you distinguish yourself from them so that, Lovepreet, you said there's commonalities. Yes, there are a lot of commonalities, and I'm speaking from my field of service, right? There's a lot of commonalities in the service field, but how do I distinguish myself as an organization from others that are doing the exact same thing? So it's Sarah, I think you said this it's a loaded question. It is. We could spend the entire hour discussing just this question. So, it's a big thing.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, from my perspective, I've always thought that the most important thing in our organization developing a relationship with a donor is to ensure that there's a reason for the relationship, right? So that they have, what is their connection to our mission? Is it personal? Or do they just believe in our cause for some reason? You know, I mean, you could make the argument everything that we do is good. It's all about motherhood and apple pie, right? It's all good stuff. But individually, people have reasons that different nonprofit missions resonate with them versus others.
Yeah.
So it really starts there.
Yes.
And I love the conversation about the relationships, right? Because I think a lot of it comes back to that. One of the things I always think it's the stories that are powerful, and it's, you know, how do you communicate the relationship that the donors have with the not-for-profits. And it actually leads into, you know, I'm hoping we can spend a little bit of time talking about families. So the baby boomers and the mature generations have been loyal donors for many years for a lot of our not-for-profits, and they've really been a top source of income. So what I want to talk about is how can not-for-profits help these mature generations and the baby boomers have conversations with their kids, with their grandkids about philanthropy and what it means. You know, and how can not-for-profits help with that conversation to drive the future generations' interest?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think as Girl Scouts, we're sort of uniquely positioned in that place because we have a lot of adult parents working directly with their daughters, and our whole program and mission is centered around developing girls' leadership through community service. So it's definitely woven, it's a woven theme through everything we do. But even in some of the other organizations that I'm involved with that maybe don't have that built-in structure where you've got children working with parents and sometimes even with grandparents, I think that's really one of the keys is how do you, through that donor or volunteer, develop strategies and ways that you can engage their children. In a previous nonprofit life, I was in a similar space, Barrett, as you, working with the homeless, and I used to take my son all the time when I volunteered and just expose him to the work that I was doing and what was happening, and that was enabled because the nonprofit was very open to that. And so I think it's how do we give our supporters ways that they can bring their children in and share the mission with their families.
I think if I could kind of piggyback off of what you're saying, Ginny, is I'm in a very unique position. Like when you talk about family, Lovepreet, my mother was the CEO at the Rescue Mission for over 35 years, and so I was just named the CEO January 1st of this year. I'd been with the organization for 17 years, kind of working my way through the organization, but I started, working there 17 years ago. And if you would have asked me when I first went to college, do you think you'll ever work at the Rescue Mission? I would have told you, no way, because I could not have worked with my mom, because the two of us are very, very much alike in our passion, very different in a lot of other ways, our leadership styles, and a lot of it is generational, right? She's from the baby boomer generation, and I've always said this to people: is the baby boomer generation is a generation that you will never see it again in this country, and we'll never see it ever anywhere. They are the strongest, hardest working generation of people that I've ever seen, right? If the job meant they had to work 60 hours a week, they'd work 60 hours a week. Didn't matter. If it meant they had to work 600 hours, they'd work 600 hours. It didn't matter to them. They would just get it done. But as I was in the organization and around the organization and kind of learned about the service, I grew to love the passion of the service and the passion of the people that we helped more so than anything else, right? And when you talk about family and generational, that you learn that through in your upbringing. You learn that as you're brought through, right? What do you learn as a child sticks with you for a long time. And I can remember as a child being at the Rescue Mission, playing basketball with the guys when I was a little kid, right? And I just and from that, I take with me every day that the guys that are at the Rescue Mission in the shelter, in our treatment center, they're human beings just like anyone else. They're just in a much different position than a lot of us are. The other thing I would say to that is coming from the nonprofit world is the people who we need to help and families need to teach their children about to get help and that need help. They need help 365 days a year. I always joke with people and they say, well, what is one of your biggest pet peeves about donors or donor bases or volunteers? It is for some reason or another, towards the end of November until the beginning of January, many people find that that's when they really want to help or they want to show their kids that people are homeless and or addicted. But the other thing is there are 9 other months in the year that those same people that we're helping at that point, they're there then too.
Right.
That's one of the things that I think people struggle with is they want to show their children and teach their children. But how do you teach them and how do you as an organization get your message out there that yes, we're here 365 days a year with the same struggles, doesn't matter day, date, it's there. Is one of the things that's a big thing that is needs to be taught and needs to be understood. I think is a big piece.
Yeah. Such an interesting story, Barrett, that you're following in your mother's footsteps like that. When you think about families, I mean, I think every family stands for something, that there are values that are passed down from one generation to the next, but we do it better when we have open conversations with one another within the family. So, and asking simple questions like, well, what's our vision for the future? What do we want our legacy to be? What do we want to be within this society? And what do we owe to society? And how can we help make our community better, or the things that we care about within that community? And so organizations like the Girl Scouts, when I think about that, that's really what you do at the core part of your mission, right, Jenny?
Right. Yeah. We teach that community service is a way to make impact in the world and to give of yourself. And that ability for that to have been passed through multiple generations, like that is one of the wonderful legacies. I think a gift of Girl Scouting to the community is that we have done that for 100 years with multiple generations. But even families that don't have that kind of legacy within them, I think you make a really good point, Sarah. You can find it because it's really just about what matters to your family.
Yeah.
In my household, my father was the one who was very involved. He was that baby boomer that Barrett mentioned. And I remember, at some point somebody asked me, well, why did you choose nonprofit? And at the time, I didn't really have an answer for that. It was, well, because an opportunity was there. But then the more I thought about it, I realized that it was all the things that my dad had been doing that impressed upon me that value set of giving back, of making a difference and helping others.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd love to tell a quick story. So just this last week, we received a mini grant from some middle schoolers who had participated in an educational program around philanthropy. So it's through a nonprofit that was founded by 2 young boys who live in South Jersey, and it's called Giving Cycle. So these 2 young boys and their mother founded this organization, and they developed a curriculum that schools in Camden are using. And so this group of middle schoolers got to talk about what their community needed and how they would like to see philanthropy make a difference. They did not know at the time that at the end of the 2-hour workshop, they would have some money to give away.
Oh,
so
that's so cool.
They identified food and hunger as being a huge issue for their neighborhoods in Camden. And our food access programs at Virtua was one of the programs that they looked at and evaluated and decided that if they had the money, they'd give some. Well, lo and behold, they had some money. So we ended up getting this wonderful mini grant from them. And I spoke to the organization's founder's mom, Daria, and it's just really remarkable. So if everyone has a chance to look up Giving Cycle, there are some very good articles that are linked to on that website about how to teach our young people about philanthropy. And I think that the more that our younger generations are involved early on in their lives, the more likely they are to stick with it as they grow up. They're more likely to be involved in service to the community. They're more likely to give. They're more likely to be in some kind of leadership role in their communities. So it's a really important way, I think, of talking about values. Giving, when you think about giving, you're thinking about, well, what do I believe in? What do I care about? And where do I want to make a difference?
I think, yeah, Sarah, the values is such a key piece to so much, right? At the mission, we have our core values, right? And it is like one of our biggest drivers. It's like built into our staff evaluation that we do every 90 days. It's all about that value, right? I always say, for when I interview people or talk to people about positions or jobs, we can teach you how to do the job, whatever the job be, right? In order to teach you the values of the organization and the values of what it means to the number one value for us is every person has intrinsic value. Every person that walks in the door of the rescue mission is a human being, and they need to be treated as such. They may be down on their luck, they may be addicted, they may be whatever is facing them, but they're still a human being. And I cannot teach you that as the CEO of the rescue mission. I can't teach you that. It's impossible for me to teach you that. You either have that or you don't. I can teach you anything else in regards to the job, but I cannot teach you that value. And it's a huge thing. And you talk about values, and at a young age and kids. My son, who is 11, I have tried since he was very young to try to show him what the rescue mission is about. Because, like I shared, some of that was instilled in me at a very young age. But one of the things during the pandemic that I've made him do is every other week we give out masks to all of our staff. So every 2 weeks I bring home boxes of masks, and he has to bag them up and put them in. And he's just like, "Oh, Dad, what? Not again!" And I said, "Adam, this is something of that. This means something to people." And but he's done it, right? He's reluctantly, but he's done it. And when you talk about that value, he's never really understood what it meant to people. But last week, ladies in the administrative office gave him a case of Reese's, a 36 box of Reese's cups, because he loves them. And they wrote him a note and said, "We just wanted you to know how much this means to us to get this." And I think the Reese's meant a lot to him, but I think he actually got it when he saw the note and said, "Oh, this actually does mean something to people," right? And it was interesting to see. But he ate all the Reese's in about a week, so maybe the Reese's has something to do with it.
Well, Barrett, you touch on something so important, which is stewardship of our donors and stewardship of those who care about our organizations. And your son, he was being stewarded and thanked and recognized. And if we don't do that, we lose those who would have done more for us, or would have, been our greatest champions. And that's just such an important topic. I was asking sorry, go ahead, Leslie.
No, I was going to say, that's a good topic. How do you scale that, right? So I'm excited. I'm hearing you guys, and I have all these questions popping up in my head. But one thing is, this recognizing your donors and retaining them, that thank you gift meant a lot. And I think thank you note, rather. How do you scale that? How do you acknowledge the many donors, whether they donate their time or treasure? What are some strategies that not-for-profits might be able to use to scale that?
Yeah, I always think that's a real challenge, especially when you're in a larger nonprofit and you're talking, potentially thousands of donors. I'm sure Sarah's got thousands of donors at Virtua, right? So I think it's a combination of structures and disciplines within the organization that generate automatic recognitions, whether it's giving levels that are mapped to certain recognitions, or just the simple, tax letter and thank you note that should come with every gift, whether it's 50 cents or $50 million, that's a really important step. And then what we try to do is really have conversations with our donors and note what matters to them, right? So, we'll do creative things from time to time, in the Girl Scout world, our donors love to get notes or stories that include or notes that include stories about girls. So, we'll do things like that. But, I've had donors who say, Ginny, I know your time is valuable, so I appreciate that you're calling me, but you know what, you don't need to call me. And what I think is also important in that, from the generational aspect, is to know when that comes from a baby boomer or somebody who might be older than a baby boomer, that probably doesn't mean don't ever call me again, right? It probably is just a polite reference to me, and to my time and all the things that I have. But I certainly wouldn't take it as don't ever call me and say thank you again. But from a millennial or a Gen Xer who's very much about the time, maybe I don't have to call them anymore. Maybe I'll send them a quick email, and that's a better way. So I think that those two, understanding the generational context of what thanking means and having a little education about that, helps you to be able to scale a bit while you still have those systems and structures in place.
Right. As far as thanking goes, it's also, I think, one of the most important things we can do is communicate how gifts have had impact. So our older donors, our older generations tend to have more trust in the institutions that they give to. They have more trust in general. So they're more likely to give a gift to us knowing that we will use their money wisely, and it will go to, programs where we can do the best work. Younger generations are a little bit more skeptical and don't have as much trust in institutions. And so they want to, if they're going to give, they're going to want to know what happened. Tell me what happened. And they also want to be able to direct the money more to where they're interested and to see it actually happening. So they want to be at the table almost, tell me, and instantaneously, tell me what happened, tell me what you did with it. But they want to direct it too. I was talking to my daughter who's in her 20s, and we were discussing this, and I said, there's so much sort of crowdfunding and GoFundMes, and it seems to be that we all want to help people in times of need, and her generation is giving directly to the individual in need, not going through an institution such as, our organizations, where we could take that money and do something with it, but it'd be more sort of bureaucratic in nature. Whereas going through a GoFundMe or crowdsourcing, you get that instant knowledge that you've done something and it went straight to the hands of the person in need. And so it kind of avoids, they can kind of opt out of what we do in a way. So how do we gain that trust, and how do we become relevant to those younger potential donors for us, and how do we keep them engaged? That's a big question.
Yeah, that's definitely.
I'd love to hear some thoughts on that, because I think that's a really important topic, right? How do you, some not-for-profits have a complex story to get out. Sometimes it's not instant. Sometimes it takes a little bit. So how do we gain the trust, and how do we market to this generation?
I think a lot of. Oh, go ahead, Barrett.
Okay. What I was saying was, I think the key. There's two keys. Ginny touched on it a lot. Is thanking someone. Everybody who donates to you, they did it and they want to be recognized for it. Give it, because you never know. The rescue mission. We have a woman who is incarcerated, and she's been incarcerated for 30 some years, and every month she sends the rescue mission a check for $5 every single month for 30 years. Wow. Right? Every single month for the last 30 years she's done it. And she includes in there every single time, thank you for helping my boy when I couldn't help him. His son must have came through the mission at some point. Oh, wow. And she just does it, right? And Mary Gay has formed a relationship with this woman over the years. Mary Gay, who's my mother, has formed a relationship because she did exactly that to me. She called her and had that conversation. People, and again, that's $5. Is it a big donation? Heck no. But to that woman, that's massive amount of money, right? Mm-hmm. And second, it's a relationship that she's built, and that's what it's about, building that relationship, with your donor base. And then the second part of that I wanted to say is as we move into this new generation, is they want to know what happens, right, Sarah? Your daughter wants to know what happens with my money but they don't want to know tomorrow. She wants to know right now what happened with my money. Right? But that's the key, I believe, as us as organizations, to become good storytellers. And being good storytellers is now become so multifaceted, right? It used to be you make a newsletter, you send your newsletter out, it's 8, 12 pages, it's this, that, and the third, but you send maybe 2 or 3 a year, it's all good, right? Now, yes, you still need to do a newsletter, but you also need to be active on Twitter, active on Instagram, active on Facebook, active on, I guess now, TikTok. I don't know. Is there another media outlet out there that I have no clue about? I don't know, because but that Sarah's daughter's generation, they want to see it there. They're not waiting for the newsletter to come in the mail, and they might not even be doing Facebook anymore, right? But they want it. They want to know now, what are you doing? And that's where you, as organizations, have to be really, really good at storytelling, and in multiple areas. You can't just have somebody that writes well. You have to have somebody that is a good videographer, good photographer, good 2 or 3, what is it, 140 characters. You got to figure out how to do it in that. There's a lot to that, but that's a big thing now. It's huge.
Yeah, and I also think it's about being open and transparent too. So transparent is a word that sometimes is a little bit loaded in nonprofit. Like, what does that actually mean, right? But there are people that, they want to flip through the audit report. They might want to see the IRS 990, right? They may want to have a discussion a little bit more about, well, what's going on inside the organization? How else can I help? And so it kind of goes hand in hand with the storytelling about being equipped and able to let them in a little bit. I think many nonprofit leaders, we've been trepidatious about that. I think there have been protections around that a little bit, and there's no reason to be, right? Because this is a world where if we don't say it, somebody else will fill in the blanks. So why don't we say it? Why don't we allow that in and have those kind of dialogues? Because what I believe is, if the folks that are asking the hard questions didn't really care, they wouldn't ask the hard questions. So, sometimes it may not feel as though they care, depending on how they approach us and want sort of the explanation of how their money is used. But I think that means that they're passionate and cared about our mission. So come on in, let's talk. I want to know what's on your mind. And, as leaders, the other thing I think that's important in that is we have to train our staffs to be equipped to do that too. Because it's not just the folks in the philanthropy department that really have that accountability to our supporters. It's really everybody in our organization, from, the folks who answered the phone to the folks that are doing the service delivery. We all, as part of that nonprofit organization, have to be ambassadors for the mission and work that we do.
Right. Yep.
I actually recall, Ginny, I visited your South Jersey office many years ago, it seems. And, as a proud millennial, I can say my generation, and probably the younger ones, they have trust issues. We've seen a lot, and the younger generation has seen even more. So I still remember, it was years ago. I don't remember the logistics or the details. I remember how I felt when I was walking around, being, led around, and there were all these pictures on the wall, and stories were being shared. And I remember that, and I trust that. So, I need to hear about it. I need to see it. I need to feel it. And then I think some of the trust is gained, and hopefully it turns into loyal supporters.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Barrett hit it right when he said, it's not just the newsletter anymore. There are so many ways that we could leverage telling stories, and the more we do, I think the better it is.
Yeah, right. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's get into, for your organizations, what different channels might you be using? Have you explored TikTok? I will say the newer Gen Z, they're 25. Actually, it might be even the generation, coming up after that. They may want snippets. They want to see quick videos. I saw United Way was using it, TikTok, and there's a lot of not-for-profits utilizing this. So let's talk a little bit about what different channels and different touch points not-for-profits can use when thinking about these different generations?
Well, apart from the usual suspects, you know, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and our websites, all of those electronic media, our CEO at Virtua is now in his second season of a podcast. And so he hosts his own podcast. Now, podcasts have become incredibly popular with all kinds of different people who are doing them, including some very well-known celebrities. And they can be anything from just pure amusement to very serious topics. And so Dennis Pullen has had some really intriguing guests where he's interviewing them, but they're talking about topics that do pertain to healthcare. And so anybody who has an interest in what's happening in healthcare can listen to these podcasts, and they're 20 to 30 minutes, and you can really gain some insight. And it's almost like having a fireside chat with our CEO. I mean, who gets to do that with a CEO of one of the largest not-for-profits in the area and really hear what's going on in his mind and what's really, you know, keeping him awake at night, so to speak. So I would recommend that our nonprofits think about those kinds of tactics, because that's another way of engaging with people beyond, you know, the usual media.
That's very interesting. I never would have thought of that. We're just kind of, I guess, Sarah, to your point, we're just kind of the usual suspects. And, you know, I know and understand that the Rescue Mission is kind of late to the game with that, but I'm very proud that we are now involved in all of it. We just at the end of last year, early this year, changed our logo and kind of rebranded ourselves and redid our website and our Facebook page and all that, made it a lot simpler and much cleaner. But I would love to have us out there more. You know, we have really become more and more active on it, but we're not as active. You know, I think the more presence you have, the more you're out there, the better it is. Even if somebody doesn't always like the message, or you're still out there, right? And you're there. I think the idea of the fireside chat or something, I think that's a really interesting concept, because it's a going back to what we were just talking about with storytelling. It's a great way of telling stories in an uncharacteristic way, right? You're just having a chat, and like you said, a lot of time CEOs are viewed as these untouchable people at the top of the organization, but at the end of the day, all three of us have prevalent roles within our organization, and all three of us are pretty normal human beings and pretty normal people, right? And,
I hope so.
Yeah. Maybe don't ask our staff about that, but I think so. Yeah. But the more that you can normalize yourself and kind of just be personable and be who you are, the more people then, going back to that thing of connecting, how do you connect with them? That's a great way of doing it. It's really, so my podcast will be starting next week.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Barrett, because as you were talking, I was just thinking, you know, you're serving a very vulnerable population, people who are homeless. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think for those of us who are leading stable lives that are not vulnerable like that, don't necessarily feel a strong connection to those people that we may want to help. We don't know those stories. The New York Times occasionally runs something, I'm trying to remember the exact name of it, but they kind of highlight a story of somebody who's really had some terrible issues and needs help. And at the end of the story, they say, if you want to help this person, you can give to this particular fund. And I know that resonates with people, and they get lots of money for that individual. Mm-hmm. But those stories are so powerful. So, I mean, the homeless people that you're helping, their backstories, I'm sure, are absolutely fascinating. And if you would, even if you could interview somebody about what happened to them in their lives, if they were able to do that, willing and able and comfortable to do that, that I think would be incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
I think it would help with the trust as well, right? Like if you hear a CEO and you hear an actual story and they're having a conversation, I imagine that does wonders for trust.
Yeah, I mean, we do, as as you already mentioned, Lovepreet, you know, we do a tour. We used to do it in the physical space, and we call it Discover Some More, where we tell stories of girls whose lives have been impacted and touched through their Girl Scout experience. And, you know, when we went into COVID, you know, we pivoted, and now we do that virtually, and we do it in two different ways. We do it still with stories, and we have girls on video. We have girls occasionally who can join the Zoom call and tell their own story. And then the other thing that I have been doing that I know we won't go back and we'll continue to do is we're doing drop-in sessions with the CEO for our corporate donors, our government contract liaisons, our program partners. You know, my team organizes it, and whoever, you know, they invite, you know, and we've never had anybody say, no, that's a terrible idea. Usually what they say is, wow, I wish I was free Wednesday, put me on the list for next time. And, you know, we aim to keep it small, about 10 to 15 folks. And I do a little, you know, 10-minute sort of, this is what we've been up to, and then what do you all want to talk about? And I had early on when we started doing that, you know, back in the late spring of last year, you know, I had a couple of our supporters say, wow, I wish so many of my other nonprofit partners would do this, because I'd love to know how they're doing. You know, I'm assuming they're in dire straits, or I'm assuming they have a lot of needs, but I would love to really know, and this is a great idea, you know, help spread the word. So there you go, I'm helping to spread the word. You know, our supporters do want to know what's going on with us. They know it's a challenging time. And, you know, any moments, whether it's a podcast or, you know, any opportunity, doesn't take a lot for me to jump on a 45-minute Zoom call. You know, it doesn't take a lot, and it goes, you know, leaps and bounds to keeping those supporters engaged. And I will say I've seen, you know, very, very young supporters, and, you know, some of our elderly supporters who maybe are stuck at home and are shut in, and they, you know, they join on their tablets too. So it really runs the gamut, you know, during what I've seen in the last year.
You know, this whole experience we've been through with the pandemic has changed the way that we communicate and connect with one another professionally, but with our donors too. And I think it's been for the better, quite honestly. We're a lot more nimble than we used to be. It was always about, I mean, face-to-face will always be the best, but the logistics of bringing a group of people together and the cost, I think it's just better stewardship of our resources when we can do things like this, and then you know, really take advantage of technology. And I do think, you know, there's this kind of stereotype of our older donors not being tech savvy. I can tell you that's really not the case. And we shouldn't discount them and say, oh no, they don't have email, they don't use email. I mean, my dad's 84 and he is as connected as my 27-year-old.
Yeah, very true. My dad doesn't speak English, but he can sure message me on his phone. So I definitely agree with that. I do want to talk a little bit more about, you know, we're talking about the pandemic. Things have changed, as, you know, Ginny, you and Sarah both have mentioned. It's just turned our worlds upside down, which means how not-for-profits are connecting with their donors. That's changed. Are there any strategies that you may have implemented that you're going to continue to carry once we're out of the pandemic? Or any thoughts that not-for-profits should really be thinking about when they're thinking about connecting with their donors in this pandemic?
Well, I mean, I think Sarah definitely said it, is, you know, stewardship of our resources. You know, one of the things, my organization for a long time hasn't done a whole lot of fancy special events, you know, where we know the really high cost of running a golf outing or a big fancy gala. You know, they all have their places, but, you know, those kinds of things, you know, what will be the appetite even for those in the future, and how should we maybe adapt and figure out what other kind of models we can run? I mean, I think that's one thing that it's going to be incumbent upon all of us to really think those things through. And then I think, you know, what I shared earlier, you know, the ability, I did a major donor call, one of those drop-in roundtables, and, you know, we have Girl Scout supporters who live well beyond the borders of our lovely state of New Jersey, and they were able to participate too. And so I think those kind of things, the more we can do those things to steward and engage our donors. Plus, the joke in my office is it mitigates the great New Jersey pain point of traffic. So, it's so much more inviting to say, jump on a 45-minute Zoom call when you aren't going to have to sit through twice that amount of time in traffic to get to an event and back again. So I think there's tremendous opportunity.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I've been quite excited about the opportunity that this change, this shift has really given us in the nonprofit world for those reasons, Ginny, because we have to really ask ourselves, how are we using our time and our resources? Are we being smart? Are we being efficient? Is having an expensive event the best return on investment, when if we simply had more authentic dialogue with our donors, they would continue to give to us whether or not we had a fancy dinner to give them as a result of their gift. In fact, many times they don't want that kind of courtship. They want that gift to have the greatest impact and to know they're making a difference. They want to be altruistic, and we have to let them be altruistic and not be so transactional. We've been the ones asking our donors to be transactional. We have to stop doing that. We have to be more authentic in our relationships for anybody.
Yeah, I know. You guys hit the nail on the head. I think with this is for so long and so often the idea of fundraising and philanthropy has been, my wife said it the other day, it was very funny. I heard her saying the other day my wife's an LCSW, she's licensed social worker. So she's a counselor and has her own private practice. So she doesn't really get it that much, doesn't do fundraising. But she says, when I think of fundraising, I think about putting on a fancy business suit, smiling and saying, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. And that's really what it's been for so long. And it's not really about, nonprofits have always thought that's what it was about, but it's really not really about that. The person who's writing the check on the other end is about the relationship and about, what is my money going to? What is it going for? Where is it going? What is it being used for? Right. And that, I think, talks about, how do you show that? How do you prove that better, right? Ginny, you guys, Lovepreet, as a young lady, went to your organization and remembered it, right? I'm sure at the end of it I'm sure you guys give them a box of cookies at the end of that.
Actually, we don't.
But
I do think, that there's the other thing about that too that I would say is there is, to take us back to the generational aspect, the other thing that I always really think about is, you also can't judge a book by its cover, so to speak, either. So, because of that relationship quotient, exactly what you were saying, personally, when I was a much younger person, an emerging professional, I had a nonprofit fundraising professional ask me for a gift of $5,000, which at the time was a huge amount of money for me, but kudos to that person, because they knew and understood that I cared so much about that mission that I'd find a way to make that $5,000 gift, and I did. And I've had similar experiences when, in a previous nonprofit role, one of the most generous funders of an initiative we had was a college student who likewise really, really cared about what we were doing. And so, scrimped and saved and donated her own pennies and gathered others around her to help support that. And so I think, we often think, well, that's a young professional, they're not quite ready for that yet. Or, oh, that's a very seasoned professional, they absolutely. I mean, I think we should challenge, while we're challenging the how, we also need to challenge what we think about the different generations and what people's sort of status is as we're cultivating our donors too. Because, you never know.
Yeah, you're so right, Jenny. You never know. And it's not, it should not ever be about that check in that moment, right? Because yes, it's nice to get that check in that moment, but if that's the only check they ever write, is it really worth all the time and effort, right? Because all of our organizations need funding to continue into the long run, right? So you have to build that relationship. And, you know, at the Rescue Mission, we run one fundraiser a year. And last year we didn't run it, obviously, because of the pandemic. And this year we're not going to run it because of the pandemic. And we run a miniature golf event. We do a miniature golf tournament at our facility. We built the miniature golf course, and we have people come in and play miniature golf, right? And it's funny because it's a space in our warehouse, and it's a one floor that we took of the entire warehouse that we have for the miniature golf, and we do it like lunch and silent auction stuff, and it's used one time a year. That's it. But in all honesty, 99% of the people that come to that event could care less about golfing. They don't come because they want to play miniature golf. They come because we have our residents in our behavioral health unit are the maitre d's of everything. There's a guy on every hole that meets and greets and talks to people. They serve the lunch. They do the coffee. They're cutting the cake. They're giving them the whatever. And the people love seeing where their money is going. Yeah. And it's so, you know, it's very, very transactional. I'm writing this, but this is also, I'm getting to see the fruits of what my check goes to every year or whatever. And, you know, people don't, like, when we announce the golf winner, sometimes people aren't even there. They don't even care. Like, they're just like, they just wanted to come to the event because they liked the event. And you know, I think we talked about it a little bit, is in this virtual world that we now have begun to live in. Yes, face-to-face will always be the greatest tool that we have. But in today's world, the next best thing is Zoom or webinar or Google Meet or one of the other 16 apps that I now have on my phone to go to meetings face-to-face. But there's a little bit of a connection still that you get through the virtual, and people want that connection. I have said to every person, please, please, please do not schedule me for a conference call. I never want to see a conference number with a dial-in pin ever again. Now that I know all this other stuff is out there, at least I can see the people I'm talking to. You know, it's like you get on a conference call now and you're like, man, this is so 2018.
Yes, that's great. So one, I will share as so coming from the other end, you know, as Mercadian, we want to help our community, and it's really important to a lot of our staff, you know, a lot of us sit on boards and give to the community. You know, we have all these different things that we do as a corporation. One of the favorite things that I think a lot of staff will agree that we do every year, unfortunately couldn't do it in the middle of the pandemic, is around the holidays, and I know it's around the holidays, we I'll lie, it's in June. We partner up with the not-for-profit where all of us, you know, 120, 30 employees take the day from work and pick a project. You know, one year we built bikes for a not-for-profit. We had blankets that we got together. So it really, a lot of us will say we don't miss the holiday party. We don't miss the food, we like the drinks, but it's really, we miss that. We miss connecting with the not-for-profits and getting that experience. And we talk about it all year round. And it's just one of those things where it really has a huge impact on us as a firm and our employees. So I definitely agree with, it's all about experiences. It's all about what sticks with the donors when they walk away from an event or, you know, or a donation.
Right. And I think it's incumbent upon us as the nonprofits to make sure, I mean, what Barrett described is the ideal, right? So it is a fundraising event, there's fun in it, and it's completely missionized. So nobody's going to walk away from that and say, what was that cause that I just supported? Or I'm not really sure, what was the nonprofit again? That's not going to happen because of the way that he runs that. And that's really what we want to make sure, that each time we're touching our donors, that we leave that same impact, so that you know, they understand the difference we're making in the lives of the people that we're serving.
Right.
And this is just good old-fashioned fundraising. I mean, it's just common sense, right? When you think about how would you yourself want to be treated? What do you want to get out of it? Even though we're talking about generations here and the different and generational differences, we as humans all are the same, no matter what our particular generation may be. And so that just makes good common sense. And so for our not-for-profits that are maybe listening into this this webinar, that would be a key takeaway is, use your gut. What's your gut telling you? And if you're not quite sure what to do, go interview some people and find out what they want. How can you connect? Talk to your donors and ask them. That, go to the horse's mouth, get the information from the horse's mouth. Don't guess. And that's such a great way to really deepen a connection, is to ask questions. If a donor feels like you're listening to them and you're interested in them, which you genuinely are, that's going to really take you a long way towards deepening that relationship.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this next topic that just entered my mind, and it might be because I'm looking for advice here. So I sit on a board of a not-for-profit. I'll say we're a young not-for-profit. And I imagine there's not-for-profits listening right now where they might be starting their marketing campaign, their fundraising. Maybe they've never asked for money before. What's something that a young not-for-profit should keep in mind when they're starting soliciting for funds?
Well, I think you got to be really clear. To Barrett said this earlier about differentiation. So there are certainly a lot of nonprofits. There's a lot of good causes, right? So why us? What makes us unique and different? And to continue to drill down on that and understand it, and to be able to explain it to the folks that you're asking for in words and language that they understand, not the technical speak. Years ago when I worked in the homeless space, we used to talk about, we help our clients become self-sufficient. Well, that meant something to us. We understood what that meant. But if you went to, somebody on the street, they would go, okay, well, that sounds really nice, but I don't know what that actually means. So, you've really got to hone the message and really be sure you can describe it in a way that people hear you and understand what you're all about.
So I think it's about impact. I think it's about what impact do you make, and then also understanding the person who you're talking with, your donor base that you're currently talking with. What Sarah, you just touched on this a second ago. Is what are they looking for, right? And what do they want to know? Are they concerned and worried about their local community? Are they concerned about the greater good of the state? Are they concerned about the greater good of the nation? Are they concerned about the greater good of the international? You have to know what your donor base is looking for and what impact can you make. And then with saying that is, that's all well and good to be able to say you can make an impact. When pushed at the end of the day, can you tell the story about how you did make that impact? Because if you can't answer yes to that question, then you're reaching for something that you probably shouldn't be reaching for. And the last thing I would say on that is be mindful of always trying to reach for everything, right? As nonprofits, a lot of times you always want to do what the donor's asking you to do, right? Sometimes as nonprofits, especially to your question, a young startup nonprofit or a newer nonprofit, you can't do it all, right? And sometimes the best thing you can do or say is say, we can't do that, but X over here can do that. Or this, I know that, because the worst thing you can do is reach for something that you can't do. And then 6 months or 8 months down the road, when they're asking for an update, and you're like, well, we're still working on that. You don't want to be in that position, and that's a tough place for a nonprofit to be, because especially as a young or a startup or a newer one, you need funding. So if somebody's sitting there with an opportunity for funding, your first intuition is to grasp for that donation, but your best bet may be sometimes to not grasp for it. I know that sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I think it's something that it's a hard thing to understand, but sometimes it's best to be true to your mission and true to who you are.
Advice. Good. Well, I can't believe it, but we're coming up against the hour. So let's leave our not-for-profits with, one last thought. If you had to pick one thought to share or the most effective strategy, something that you want to leave our not-for-profits with.
I would say, remember to have genuine conversations with your donors, no matter how much money they give you. It's very, very meaningful to the donor, and it's equally meaningful to you. Demonstrate that through genuine conversation, and always, always let people know what you've done with their gift.
Excellent. Excellent.
Can we just say ditto? I think that really sums it up. I mean, and this session was about different generations. I mean, I would also say do some homework. You can look a little bit into some of those unique attributes. There is data and research out there, but don't allow it to bias that relationship you have with the individual. But it is helpful, and it can be helpful, at least to get started.
Yeah. I don't even know if I have anything to say. The only thing I would say, you guys, perfect and more perfect, I guess, there. But the one thing I would say that I have learned is there's two things. Is one, it's all about stories. Tell stories. Tell about your clients. People want to know where their money's going, and it's not about you. It's not about no one really cares if they hear. Do they care if they hear from Barrett as a thank you? Sure. But they really don't care about Barrett. They care about the organization, and they care about what the organization did, not about what Barrett did or what Barrett. It's about the organization and the service that you did with what their donation brought to you. And that all goes back to, and we've talked a lot about it in here. It's about stories. Tell stories. Tell stories. Tell stories. I think that was what I would end on. So
that is so great. Thank you so much to our panelists, Barrett Young from the Rescue Mission of Trenton, Ginny Hill with the Girl Scouts of Central and Southern New Jersey, and Sarah Fawcett-Lee from Virtua. And thank you to all of you out there for attending this panel. We hope to see you soon at the next one. And until next time, I'm Lutfrid Buttar from Mercadian, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.